Alright, gonna show a little demonstration on how to properly perform a torque sequence, in case nobody ever knew. First thing, count your bolts, make sure that they're all in there. For this particular vehicle, you want to make sure that your camshaft gears are lined up pretty well, because these cams can slide back and forth a little bit, and they'll even out once you torque the bridge on there. But it's good to just kind of get it as close as possible before before you torque the cylinder head cover down, because it's actually technically part of the cylinder head and it makes it a lot harder to slide them. So, got my torque sequence, got my specs. All the bolts are in there, they're brand new. You have to replace them, they're torque to yield. Got my snap-on gun so in the lowest setting for basically quote-unquote hand tight, and you start with the sequence. It doesn't say to do it, but rule of thumb, I've seen it on a lot of other vehicles. Some of them specify, some don't, but rule of thumb, middle out. So this is basically what finger tight would be. This just makes it a little quicker. Next one. So this is an interesting setup here. This engine doesn't actually have a sealant that completely dries. It's called an anaerobic sealant. And there's no cam bearings. The cam races are actually part of the cylinder head cover. So pretty interesting design, but it works pretty good. This is I'm doing this because there was oil leaking down into one of the spark plug holes, and this literally does not happen on these engines. I realized when I got it out it was because the sealant at the factory about 50,000 miles ago was applied to the incorrect places, and most likely the wrong thickness of the sealant, which held together pretty good for a while. But at 60,000, when he was ready to do his spark plugs, we found oil in cylinder number 4 spark plug hole. And then there's 2 bolts down the end here. Oop. Get on there. Alright. Alright. Now, that was just to get it done with the quickness, and that probably actually under-torqued it to finger tight, so we're going to go back and just give them all a little snug. And with machined parts, you always want to tighten things in sequence, even when you're not just doing your final torque, but the first bit of it. You know what, some people will be like, oh, I did it this way and it turned out fine. Well, you know what? You got lucky. I do this for a living. Things need to be done right. And maybe you thought you did it right because nobody ever came back and said that something was messed up. But you know what? That's because when it did get messed up, you didn't bring it back to you. You brought it to someone else, probably me. And then I found what was wrong with it. Alright, that's pretty tight. And tight. Alright, going to calibrate the torque wrench. 8 Newton meters is where I want it. Now we're going to let it do its angle torque. And the torque is 90 degrees, so we're going to turn that up a bit. Cool. And we'll go back to normal torque sequence. Alright. All right, and you want to do it nice and smooth and easy. If you don't, you can actually under torque it if you're going too fast, due to the fact that you reach the final torque for a second, and if you had been going smooth, you actually need to go farther before it reaches its final torque. Don't mind me, it's just a little goofy doing this with one hand. And as you can see, as I'm torquing it, the other bolts are loosening up a bit. So now that we've got the center bit torqued down, we're just gonna finger tighten these again. That way, keep everything nice and even. Yo. Yep, go for it. And the reason why they're loosening up is because there's some space between the two bits, just because until it's final torqued, it doesn't actually squeeze everything together. So, all right. Alright. Oop. Get on there. Again, a little goofy doing this with one hand. And it's starting to sandwich down good now, you can tell, because we're getting to the last two main rows and they're already loose again, even though I've already finger tightened them 2 times. Alright, and then the last 2 little areas over here. And you can see this is the last bolt. Look at how much that's loosened up just from torquing everything. Alright. And I always go back and just double check. Yep, that first bolt is pretty much right about the torque that it was before. Cool thing about this torque wrench is it tells you how many bolts you've torqued, just so you don't lose track. Alright, we've got it on rotational now. And this part of the torque is stretching the bolt. That's why they're called torque to yield. If you remove this bolt, you can never use it again. It has, when you remove the bolt, it doesn't go back to how long it was originally when you first got the bolt. It stays supposedly where it was at the final torque, which means that if you try and use it again, you won't actually get a proper torque on it. And if you try and do the torque sequence with a already torqued torque to yield bolt, you'll end up over torquing it. Things can snap, or you can warp machine parts. You'd be surprised how important some of these little steps can be. And I don't remember if I did a rotational torque on the fourth bolt in the first row, so when I get to the end of it, I'm gonna double check how many I torqued. And if it's only 21, then I know I gotta go back and do a rotational torque on that last bolt in the first row. I'm doing this video because I see a lot of videos online from friggin' Joe Schmo's backyard showing people how to do things the wrong way. And I wish more people would actually show you how to do the right thing instead of, oh yeah, this will work. Because you know what? I'm working on a Volkswagen Golf R right now, and I've worked on everything. And I tell you what, if the words, "it'll probably be good," runs through your mind when you're working on a German car, I promise you it won't. See you later, Marco. What's good? Fuck you too.
Hey, that hoe says she likes you.
Hey, when you get home today, go fuck yourself.
Okay. I'll try.
Alright.
If that's possible.
Alright. Last two suckers right here. Alright. Alright, let's look and see what we got here. .22. Good stuff.